With Aaron Rodgers now on the Pittsburgh Steelers, Mike Tomlin has his best chance yet at a second Super Bowl. I'll break it down on today's edition of Locked On NFL.
The new Locked On NFL. The madman Tyler Rowland is your double shot of NFL espresso with the Locked On local experts on every major story. Get ready, Rowland is revving up. The new Locked On NFL starts now. Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Football fans, welcome in to the Locked On NFL podcast, bringing you a double dose of the NFL's biggest stories with help from our local experts that know your favorite teams like no one else. I am your host, the madman, Tyler Rowland, running solo on today's show, and I got a lot for you. We're going to look at all of the coaches in the NFL that currently have a Super Bowl championship and whether it's realistic that they could win another. We'll talk about Andy Reid getting the Chiefs back on track, why Pete Carroll has no chance this year with the Raiders, and why Mike Tomlin has his best chance at a second Super Bowl since he had Ben Roethlisberger. Before we dive into all of it, I do want to thank you for making Locked On NFL your first listen each and every day. Remember, Monday through Friday, NFL content. It may be the summer break for the NFL, but there is no break here at Locked On NFL, so make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here on the Locked On Podcast Network. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $150 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. We got to start with Mike Tomlin in Pittsburgh. And I have said throughout the process that I think you'll see a different Aaron Rodgers this year. And even though he's old, even though he's still obviously coming off the Achilles injury from a year and a half ago that may linger at this age, there are a lot of reasons to be pessimistic about Aaron Rodgers. But one of the main reasons I have to be optimistic about Aaron Rodgers is he is in a different organization now. This is different than the New York Jets, who he was trying to lift up from the dumps for the last 50 years. You know what I mean? Since Joe Namath won that guaranteed Super Bowl. Like, since then, the Jets have done nothing, and Aaron Rodgers at 40 years old was trying to kind of lift that team, not just as a football team, but culturally lift them out of the gutter. Well, the Pittsburgh Steelers are the total opposite of that. You could argue that the Pittsburgh Steelers are the greatest franchise in the history of the NFL. It would be my argument that they are. Now, another team that rivals that title as the greatest franchise in the history of the NFL might be the Green Bay Packers, who have the most NFL championships, not Super Bowls, of course, but have enough Super Bowls in their own right. And that's where Aaron Rodgers obviously had all his success. And my guys over at Peacock and Williamson, they see the addition of Aaron Rodgers, and shout out to Matt Williamson, former NFL scout, close to the Steelers organization. He's seeing the same exact thing.
So the Pittsburgh Steelers, you plug in a future Hall of Fame, a no doubt Hall of Fame quarterback, even in his 40s. It's a better look now as I'm paraphrasing you from just a few minutes ago. This is the best quarterback situation that the Steelers have had since Ben Roethlisberger was good.
Right.
Yeah. And probably better than late career Ben Roethlisberger.
I think so. Yeah, I'm expecting that.
Yeah.
And they've won a lot of games with these crappy quarterbacks in between,
Right.
Not enough. But
if you take a 500 team, but the Jets thought the same thing. The Jets thought they had a defense they're going to plug in this Hall of Fame quarterback. Now, one year was a torn Achilles on the first play, and then the next year it just didn't quite work out for them. So I ask you, what's the expectations for the Steelers, and why would it work out better this year, a year older for Aaron Rodgers than it did last year in New York?
Because the organizations couldn't be any more different. And one of them has 6 trophies you walk past every day, and one of them has weird ownership, coaches, lack of stability. Cam Hayward's not in the locker room. The Walter Payton Man of the Year. There's not a Tomlin. There's not a Rooney. I mean, I think that's really the difference. And one team always wins 8 to 10 games, and the other one doesn't. And plus Pittsburgh's a much different city than the Big Apple and the focus too.
The organization itself of the Pittsburgh Steelers will insulate Aaron Rodgers to a point. It's still Aaron Rodgers. He's still a monster star. He's going to be out there. You know what I mean? But it's a different, like Matt is saying there, it's a different set of pressure when you're in Pittsburgh and you kind of get the benefit of the doubt with that organization than with the New York Jets, where you have the most vicious media in the world going at, well, some of that soccer media across the pond, man, they're pretty crazy over there. But, I mean, obviously, you know what I mean with the New York market. And then the New York Jets are always catching arrows, and it's low-hanging fruit to pick on the Jets because you can pretty consistently count on them to underperform or to disappoint. So now Aaron Rodgers is in a totally different spot. And to me, I think Mike Tomlin really does have a true chance to get his second Super Bowl here. It's the best chance that he's had since he had late game Ben Roethlisberger for sure. I think Aaron Rodgers right now is better than Kenny Pickett. He's better than Mason Rudolph. He's better than Russell Wilson from last year or Justin Fields from last year as well, in my opinion. So I think Aaron Rodgers as a passenger in the car, not a driver of the car, does have a good opportunity to do something real with Mike Tomlin if the rest of the roster stands out. And I think Pittsburgh's got some more moves to make as well to get the roster where they need to make a serious run. But I'm going to say yes, Mike Tomlin does have a serious chance at getting that second championship. And moving forward, though, looking at another team, and speaking of a team that could be making some additions, the Los Angeles Rams. Sean McVay has one Super Bowl. Can he get number 2 this year? The definitive answer is yes. I don't see how anyone could look at what the Rams are doing and possibly say that they don't have a definitive chance. Yes. Do they have a real chance to get that second Super Bowl for Sean McVay? There's no way you could say no with what the Rams have right now. The weapons they have on offense with Devontae Adams and Puka Nacua and Kyron Williams. Matthew Stafford is a reliable gunslinger who we know if he gets hot, Matthew Stafford can morph into, Pat Mahomes without the mobility. Like, he has insane arm talent, all-time arm talent. When he gets in a rhythm and he's firing, he is one of the top 5 he's like the 5th best quarterback in the NFL behind the big 4 that we all know. Like, Matthew Stafford can be that good on any given day, and it's probably a top 10 quarterback still. So, when you have all that, and then you go to the defensive side of the ball, and the fact that all of their best defensive players are younger guys who are going to get better, Jared Verse might be a top 3 defensive end in the NFL this year. Like, he's a guy you don't want to mess with and who looked great at the end of the season. It looked like he was going to a totally different level. He was a game wrecker in the playoffs, like totally different monster. So you have all of that on the roster. And we already know from last year that they were a top 8 team. You have all of that, and you have Sean McVay. Back to where we began the conversation. Can Sean McVay get his second Super Bowl? I am fully smitten by Sean McVay, I admit. I think he is absolutely fantastic. Okay, and the Rams go through these waves because of the way that they build their roster and how they go all in all the time. And it may take them a little bit to get back to that point, but they're in a cycle right now where they have tremendous amount of talent because they just hit on all their draft picks. And you give Sean McVay that good of a team, I believe that Sean McVay is a top 3 football coach in the NFL. Point blank, period. Stop. Andy Reid's probably the best. We could argue who should be number 2, 3, whatever, but I think Sean McVay is clearly in that top 3 of coaches. So with this talented of a roster, and as loaded up as they are, the offensive line has questions, of course, but I trust Sean McVay to get the absolute most out of that football team, and they have enough talent to be an obvious division winner, and then for McVay to get the most juice out of the squeeze, absolutely yes, the Rams have a chance to get Sean McVay his second Super Bowl. But what about some coaches over in the AFC West? Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. Look, summer sports are in full swing. Whether you're all about baseball under the lights, golf on the greens, or high-stakes soccer action, FanDuel is the best way to make every game even more exciting. You're already following the action. Why not make it a little more thrilling? With FanDuel, you can get in on the game while your friends are getting sunburned on the beach. That's probably me getting sunburned on the beach, realistically. But look, You could use FanDuel to track all your favorite matchups. The app keeps fresh, new daily promotions. I love how there's always a new promotion on FanDuel to give you a better way to get a good payout. Whether you're doing same-game parlays or betting on the ninth inning, FanDuel makes it feel like you are part of the action. New to FanDuel, new customers can bet just $5 and get $150 in bonus bets if your first bet wins. Open the FanDuel app today or visit FanDuel.com/lockedon to get started. It's FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. All right, NFL fans, let's continue today's edition of Locked On NFL. We talked about Mike Tomlin, Sean McVay. Can they get their next Super Bowl, their second Super Bowl? I think both of them are in position to have that opportunity. I mean, the Steelers need more to go right than the Rams because the Rams are a better team, but nonetheless, I think both have a real shot. But now I want to talk about two coaches who I personally don't believe, who I don't believe these coaches have a real shot to win a Super Bowl this season. And we are going to start with Pete Carroll and the Las Vegas Raiders. Look, am I breaking news here to you guys? Pete Carroll and the Las Vegas Raiders, led by Geno Smith, with Jacoby Myers as their #1 wide receiver. I mean, they have Brock Bowers. Let's not bury the lead on that. That's clearly their best weapon. But the point is, the Raiders do not have a good enough roster to win the Super Bowl. I'm sorry. Absolutely no. There's no, listen, I try to be open-minded. The NFL is crazy. Things change a ton. But the Super Bowl? Not a shot. Now, I think a more realistic question for the Raiders is, can they make the playoffs? And my guy Q, your boy Q, from Locked On Raiders, talked about that recently.
It's not impossible. Like something I've been talking about. It's not impossible. It's just very difficult. And if the Raiders were in the AFC South, I'd feel a lot better than for their shot. If they're in the NFC South, I feel a lot better for their shot to make it happen, right? Than I do because they're in the AFC West. But again, like you talked about, the teams that make the playoffs the year before, 5 teams on average don't make the playoffs. So if you go through the playoff teams last year and you say, okay, what 5 do you think won't make it? That could be part of the riddle as well. And you can look at the AFC West. If you want to be honest about the situation, 3 teams from the AFC West made it. Doesn't mean all 3 are going to make it again. So if on the average 5 teams don't make it, maybe 1 or 2 of those teams that made it won't make it this upcoming year. Maybe that opens up the door for the Raiders, right? But that's the job. That's the responsibility.
Listen, you want to talk about the playoffs? I could hear that the Raiders slide into the playoffs. Like, I guess in the realm of possibilities, that could be the case. But at the end of the day, I don't buy that either. You know, my answer is no. Are the Raiders going to make the playoffs? No, because it's not just that I don't think their team has enough talent. They don't have enough talent in the secondary. They don't have enough talent at linebacker. The offensive line looks pretty solid. They have some talent there. You have a guy like Colton Miller, of course. You have a guy like JPJ, Jackson Powers-Johnson. Excellent players there. You know, there's stuff to work with. You add in Ashton Genty. They had 0 to like at running back last year. Like, it's not, you know, it wasn't a good situation. And now you add Ashton Genty, you could have one of the best running backs in the NFL. So I could see how Geno Smith, upgrade at quarterback, major upgrade over Aiden O'Connell, Gardner Minshew, major upgrade in Geno Smith, who I think is probably a top 15 quarterback. Some people see him as a top 10 quarterback in the NFL, and at his best, yes, but I'm not quite to that level with Geno Smith. There are other guys that would probably take over him, but that's a conversation for a different day. But regardless, you see Brock Bowers, you see Ashton Genty. You're going to get improved coaching from Pete Carroll, guy who's done it before. They have some pieces on the offensive line. Like, I'm not trying to poo-poo the Raiders entirely, okay? Obviously, Max Crosby is a monster. I love Christian Wilkins, back healthy, make plays this season. That would be monstrous for him. But they lost Trevon Moehrig in the back end. I don't like that. Again, the secondary is not in a good spot. I have some worries there. So for me, I think the Raiders will be a scrappy team this year. I think what I would compare the Raiders to this year is last year's Arizona Cardinals, or maybe the Panthers from last year would be a better way to put it. I think maybe that's fair. I just see them as a scrappy team, and they have some good moments, and they'll have like a close loss to the Chiefs in the back half of the season where they look like they're going to win, but they lose Kansas City wins again, blah, blah, blah. But you look at them and you're like, that team's coming, though. They're building something. Like when the Cardinals came back on San Francisco in like the second month of the season, it was like, okay, the Cardinals are scrappy. Like, of course, we don't need to set our expectations too high, but the Cardinals are scrappy, right? So that's where I think it's at. But ultimately, the thing that keeps me from giving the Raiders a real chance at the playoffs is their division. Like, you have the Chiefs. I think the Chiefs maybe take a baby step back this year, but even with that, a baby step back for the Chiefs is still better than the Raiders, right? Let's be realistic. And then the Chargers, I think the Chargers are only going to continue to get better as they mold themselves in the image of Jim Harbaugh. Year one, you're just making replacements, adding in people who fit your style. Then in year two, you're like, okay, we have some holes filled with some of these guys. We're not totally turning over a new leaf. Now we can start to build out. Like, think about their wide receiver group. Like, they got Ladd McConkey last year, and they're like, okay, we have a terrible group, but we have you. We don't necessarily have the running backs that we would want for a Jim Harbaugh system. We have the best we can. We've done the best we can. We're going to get Joe Alt, and we're going to be like, okay, we're fortifying our identity here. We get Ladd McConkey. We get Joe Alt. We got 2 cornerstone pieces. What a great start to the draft for the Chargers. Joe Horowitz, or I think that's how you say it correctly. But regardless. And then you have the Broncos. And the Broncos are going to be a really good team. Again, Sean Payton finally has his guy in place at quarterback. They're looking like they're starting to build. They're very competitive in Denver. And at the end of the day, how are the Raiders going to be better than those 3 teams? And it's funny because my guys over at Locked On Broncos talked about that as well. Like, you got Sean Payton. How is this team? This team's not going to be worse than the Raiders.
Probably one of the more heated rivalries in NFL history, and that is the Denver Broncos against the Las Vegas Raiders. And I see a lot of conversation. I feel like this is one of those dynamics you're going to see between the two fan bases. The Raiders over the last handful of years have had the Broncos number, except last year. It was when Bo Nix came in and turned the tide. The Broncos swept the Raiders after losing, 8 straight games against Vegas at that point. The last time the Broncos had beaten them before last year was when they were still called the Oakland Raiders. So at that point, Denver was kind of in the basement a little bit. But I think the Broncos have garnered traction. Last year, they obviously jumped ahead of the Raiders in a big way, swept them. And I still think even with their additions of Pete Carroll and Geno Smith, I'm a firm believer that the Broncos are still ahead of the Raiders, and that move isn't going to mean much.
See, I agree there. I just think here's kind of my problem with the Raiders have done. They've made themselves infinitely more competitive, but it's still not enough in their division. And Geno Smith is at the age at 34, 35, where by the time that Pete Carroll can build something, they're probably going to need another quarterback. And maybe he could slide a Russell Wilson in there, like Matt Hasselbeck style, and now they're just ready to go. But where's Pete Carroll at by that time? So I say no, obviously, for Pete Carroll, but I'm going to say no for the Broncos, too. I think Sean Payton is going to have this team back in the playoff chase. But remember when we listened to your boy Q at the beginning of this segment, and he said, on average, 5 teams every year make the playoffs last year and didn't. Who would you bet on to miss the playoffs between the Broncos and the Chargers? Chargers have a better quarterback, right? Sean Payton, better coach than Jim Harbaugh, right? Maybe, right? I mean, Jim Harbaugh doesn't have one, but Jim Harbaugh's still a pretty good coach. It's not like it's a complete beatdown, And then after that, it's, who has more talent on the roster? I think I'd probably lean Chargers. Broncos have some good players, though. These are 2 good teams. But again, if you had to make a tough decision, 5 teams are going to fall out. And odds are that one of them will come from the AFC West. So, can Sean Payton win a Super Bowl this year? My answer is no. The Broncos are not real Super Bowl contenders, even though I think they will be a very good team. I just think it's too difficult in the position that they're in, and I don't think that they have superstar talent at enough spots. They kind of remind me of the Packers right now. The Packers are consistent. I know they're going to be a good team. I can count on that, but they just don't have enough big-time players to make big-time moments. I think you get your roster to a point where the roster is really good and you have enough key positions. like set and ready to go. And then you got to, you don't win a Super Bowl with, just a basic sundae. You need the whipped cream. You need the cherry on top. That's how you win a Super Bowl. And right now, the Broncos and the Packers both, they don't have the cherry on top. They don't have the whipped cream. Not enough for me. So can Pete Carroll or Sean Payton get their next Super Bowl? To me, the answer is no. All right, football fans, let's cap off today's edition of Locked On NFL, looking at championship coaches and who can get their next one. We talked so far about a bunch of coaches with one title, and we're going to keep that up. But I do want to throw Andy Reid in this conversation, even though he's got multiple to his name. And similarly, I think that a coach that may not have multiple, but John Harbaugh is another well-respected veteran coach who's more in the Andy Reid mold than maybe some of these other guys. But we have talked a lot of these older guys with Pete Carroll and Sean Payton and such and such. But with that being said, do want to start here with John Harbaugh. Now, I think that the Ravens obviously have a yes. John Harbaugh, Andy Reid, and even can Nick Sirianni get his next one? Andy Reid's the only one with multiple out of everyone that we've talked about. But, figure I'd throw him into the conversation. Good old Andy Reid. It's always better when Andy Reid's around, right? But I don't see how you could make an argument whatsoever that any of those coaches don't have a realistic shot. Lamar Jackson is incredible. If he can ever play his best in the playoffs, if he gets hot for a playoff run, it's over. It's over. Lamar Jackson at his absolute peak, with the talent that they have on Baltimore's roster in the playoffs, it's over. He's going to beat anybody. He's just too good when he's playing his absolute best. They're too good as a team. It's Baltimore, man. There's a mystique to that franchise, and there always has been. So 100% yes, Baltimore has a chance. The Eagles won the Super Bowl last year. Do I have to get on here and go into great lengths and great detail about how Philadelphia has a real chance to win a Super Bowl? Of course they do. But Andy Reid is the interesting one. I continue to think, and you call me crazy, shout out to my guy Alex Clancy from Locked On Cardinals. He has a phrase, it's Patrick Mahomes until it isn't. And last year it wasn't, right? It was Patrick Mahomes until it wasn't. But I think that you could make the argument I'm getting a little overzealous by expecting a step back from the Chiefs. And when I say step back, I don't mean that they're going to miss the playoffs, but I don't think I'm going to have the Chiefs winning their division this year. I think I'm going to have the Chargers. I thought about the Broncos. I've been going back and forth because I think the Chiefs take a little bit of a step back. So in my mind, a peek behind the curtain, how the sausage is made. In my mind, I'm like, okay, if I think the Chiefs take a little bit of a step back, and I think they have a very good division and someone else wins the division, well, it's got to be one of the Broncos or the Chargers. Who do I trust more there? Who do I believe in more there? Who do I like more there right now? So I've been going back and forth. And honestly, some days I think Broncos, and I say Broncos, and some days I think Chargers. But the closer we get to training camps, when I can kind of iron out all these feelings, sort my feelings. I'm just a man at the end of the day. Doesn't know how to process them. I think it's obvious to me that the Chargers are the team that I'm going to have winning the AFC West. And if the Chargers win the AFC West, again, I think that means the Chiefs took a little step back, and I think that's what's going to happen. But I'll still have the Chiefs making the playoffs. But I think maybe 10 wins, 11 wins for Kansas City this year, and you're like, step back, 10, 11 wins. Listen, I know. I am not a Chiefs fan, The Tennessee Titans went 3-14 last year, and I'm up here telling you a step back is 10 or 11 wins. But seriously, think about it, I just think when we look at the Chiefs' performance, we look at their standing at the end of the year, I think they'll be a high wild card, probably the first wild card. But I think that's a step back for the Chiefs, who have won their division, how many years in a row? Double-digit years in a row now since 2016 or something, So I think the Chiefs take a step back in performance. They make the wild card. They don't win their division. But even saying that, there's no way I can tell you that the Chiefs don't have a chance to win the Super Bowl. You have Patrick Mahomes, you have Andy Reid. You will always have a chance to win the Super Bowl. Now, Rashee Rice comes back. He going to be good to go? He looks good so far. How many games is he going to play? Hollywood Brown, can he stay healthy and actually give you that dynamic threat? They have a ton of speed. You add Xavier Worthy. They really trying to load back up on speed guys. That's great, but the offensive line, what's going to happen there? They signed Jalen Moore, who was a backup for San Francisco, but had a lot of good moments filling in, Trent Williams and stuff. They get rid of Joe Thuney. Trey Smith needs to be paid. Juwan Taylor is just okay at right tackle for what he's getting paid. It's going to be interesting. It's going to be interesting to see. Kingsley Suamatai was supposed to be tackle last year. They're moving him into guard. They have a lot of questions to answer. And you look at the defensive line. Outside of Chris Jones, it was not very good, especially on the edge last year. So Kansas City has a lot of questions, and they need to make that roster a lot better, and I'm just not certain that they've done it. They might need another offseason to kind of get it back to where they need to be, and we know losing the Super Bowl hurts a team the next season. It is confirmed. It is scientific data at this point. It hurts. The Super Bowl hangover is real for the team that loses, and Kansas City finally lost, and now it's like, it's like opening a pop in the carbonation. You open it and then you close it real quick and it kind of builds. It builds and builds and builds and builds. And it can hold. But once you do open it, and it may be a situation where because Kansas City was winning the Super Bowl in back-to-back years, they were able to keep their spirits high, keep the motivation high. But now that they've lost once, it kind of all comes crashing down on you at once. All of the toll that's been taken on you the last 3 years of these long postseason runs and playing 20 football games a year, and now we lost. Oh, no. The party's over. The hangover's here. So that combined with a tough division, maybe some holes on the roster that will continue to be exposed that I don't think they filled enough. All of that in the soup together, I think Kansas City takes a step back. But again, just because of that, who knows if they get hot and what happens at the end. They finally answer those questions. They make moves in the middle of the season. I don't think that you can realistically, with any respect for yourself, get on a public platform and say 100% the Kansas City Chiefs do not have a chance to win the Super Bowl this year. It's asinine, and I can never do it. So, of course, Andy Reid is a yes for me. But with that being said, that is going to do it for me today, folks. Thanks again for tuning in to Locked On NFL. Solo mission here for the Madman. Hope you guys did enjoy. I'm going to be back tomorrow with my guy, Lauren Cox. We got a lot to discuss here. Again, it may be the summer break for the NFL, but there is no break for Locked On NFL. So make sure that you get subscribed, stay subscribed. It's your team every day here at the Locked On Podcast Network. So again, I am your host, the Madman, Tyler Rowland, as I tell you every episode. Thanks for tuning in, and stay safe out there.